can do with them. A lot of it is going to be weathering related. Well, we normally use, well, what I used to use enamels and oils for. You can use acrylics to do the same thing as you do with oil paints for washes or you know, dust and dirt effects. Everything can be done with the acrylics. So I'll cover that a little bit. And please, if you have any questions, ask. Because I'm mainly going to be talking, not doing really so much. Usually people have lots of questions, and I can explain things here, and then you can come to our stand, and I can show you. You can sit right in front of me. I'll show you, and I'll hand you the airbrush or the paintbrush, and I'll let you go ahead and do it so you can get a feel for it. Because I can show you all day long, but until you have that in your hand and get the feel for it, especially airbrushing, you really won't learn. You can go home and try to do the same thing, and you won't get the same results.
You mind if people come up a little closer? Does that bother you?
Please, no, not at
Go
all.
ahead, slide up. Just, give me about a 2-foot thing there, and mind the tripod. You have to go to that and stuff. We got to keep it a little easier. It's a warmer feeling for community.
All right. Anyone not use acrylics before? Anyone new to acrylics, or everyone's used acrylics? Good. So,
Just recording all this.
acrylic paints.
There is something before. I'm sorry.
There's a difference with acrylics. The name acrylics, a lot of companies call paints acrylics. True acrylics are water soluble, like ours. There's no solvent in it. It's not lacquer based or anything like Tamiya paints are lacquer based. They can be thinned with water, but they're not true acrylic. Like I said, they've been around for a long time. I have 2 bottles here I bought in 1995 when I was attending a workshop on painting figures. And that's before the Model Air came out, well, in Germany where I was. And then I still have the first Model Airs too that came out, and they still work. And I still use these 2 colors all the time. My Tamiya paints from 3 years ago dried up and I threw them out.
Still working.
Just saying,
Yeah.
I've tossed out a lot of Tamiya paints, and I used to use it all the time. Because
I'm not saying
where I
your
was,
paints are bad. Yeah, I'm not saying that at all. No.
this right here, I'll take any day over it. And I used to swear by Tamiya paints, but I couldn't do some things that I can do with this paint. Well, a lot of things. We have the Model Air range, which is for airbrushing, but you can also use it for brush painting, like small things, shovels and whatnot. I like to use it for weathering because it's already nice and thin, and I thin it some more. We have our airbrush thinner that you can thin it with. You can also thin with water or the airbrush cleaner. Airbrush cleaner, I don't recommend thinning too much with it because it is a cleaner, and if you make the model too wet, you could potentially ruin the primer underneath or loosen it.
It attacks the base.
Well, it's a cleaner. It's formulated to clean your airbrush, break down the paints. The thinner isn't. So I go by that or tap water. They're in the airbrush thinner bottles because I like to refill from the big bottles. It's just easier because it drops. Model wash. We have model wash now, and this is also acrylic, so it's all water soluble. It's not an enamel like or like the oil paints that we used to use that I stopped using because I got the hang of using these, and they're pretty good. You can do a lot with this. I use it for regular painting and shading, as well as filters and a wash. I mix it with the Model Color, Model Air paints. It's all acrylic paints and it's all water soluble, and they can all be used together. So you can mix up whatever colors you want, and with the wash, with the primer, you can use just primer as a paint color. I've done that too. For doing weathering, I like to use our glaze medium or the thinner medium, especially if I'm doing figures. I'll use the thinner medium for thinning the paint, and maybe a little bit of water. All it does is it thins the paint, and it also extends the working time. You know, like you do with oil paints, you have that work time where you can play around and manipulate the colors and create effects. You can do the same thing with acrylics, and the most important thing is water and having wet brushes, damp brushes, and then you can do anything. You can do a lot of weathering and painting in a short period of time, just by having water and a brush there and the paint. You can spend a whole day working on one little section, adding thin layers of different effects, and it gives it more depth, and it brings a model to life. I'm going to go over to airbrushing, because a lot of people still aren't sure about it. Air pressure will recommend 12 to 15 psi. Okay, this is very different than enamel paints, where we used to use high pressure for painting. I mean, you can go up to 15, 20, but then you're going to be back here like this spraying, and you're going to use a lot of paint and have a lot of overspray. Now, if you drop the pressure, you can get nice and close and paint a model, and put nice light coats on it till you have full coverage. You don't want to try to get it, what some people say, wet, by applying 1 or 2 nice heavy coats. When you do that, it'll dry, it'll take longer, but it'll start drying from the outside, okay? So you'll think it's dry and you'll handle it and try doing whatever, continue painting or washes, but it's not fully dry underneath. So it'll peel on you. If you apply light coats, it has time to dry, time to for the pigments to bind together, and half an hour, well, you paint the model, clean your airbrush, you can go right to it and handle it and start doing whatever you want to. Put a clear coat on it if you want clear varnish, and start weathering right away. And for curing, I always tell people 24 to 72 hours full cure, and it's rock hard like this, and you won't scratch it off. If you think it's cured, in a couple hours, it's just dry, but you could risk, nicking the paint off, it peeling, because it's not fully cured. You'll feel the difference when it's cured. It won't be cold like when it's just dry. I recommend always, not filling up a cup or half a cup. I do 10 drops, and if I'm thinning, 2, maybe 3 tops of thinner or water. People ask, how much can you paint with 1 bottle? A lot. You can paint a lot. I can probably paint that with 5 drops of paint and a drop of thinner. And like I said, all it is light coats and weathering. I'm going to put a couple more because I know I'm going to be stopping in between. As far as weathering, I do a lot of weathering with airbrushing. You can create all your dust effects. You can pass that around. That's just some highlights and a light dust coat. And the same thing with that one. This side I already experimented, played around, did some weathering. But the right side, all I did was add some dust and what would be dust streaks. And you can take it even further with the airbrush and the acrylics. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can't. Right? You can't see what's going on? No color? Good. It's exactly what you want. You can barely even see it. And that's actually already dried. I could start here, and by the time I work my way around, this is already dry, and I can keep going. Just spray in different directions, work your way around until you have full coverage. I tell people 2 or 3 light misted coats, and then after that, each coat you apply, give a little bit more paint. Not so it's really wet, but just a little bit more paint until you have full coverage, especially if you do pre-shading like that. I usually don't do pre-shading that much, not as bad as this is. I tend to do it with the airbrush and the base color. By lightening and darkening the color, I can create effects with the paint. And this is already dry here. If you apply heavy coats, you're not going to be able to go right over it again. You have to wait and let it dry, and you definitely can't touch it. How many drops of paint did I use?
5.
So our AFV color sets have smaller bottles. They're 8 milliliter bottles. And a lot of people think you can only paint one model with it. You can't. You can paint one model and maybe run out the base color that you're using. But I've used one set and painted 3 models with it. Because you don't need a lot of paint. Unless you're doing high air pressure and you're standing back here. Then you're painting everything. See, like this, I can get right in there and paint with low pressure. That's just about empty. So I pretty much got a lot on there just with 5 drops of paint. And as far as the weathering, I'm going to go ahead and put a nice heavy coat on there. Like I said, I do a lot of what I call weathering, and basically weathering is anything that you're doing to the base color. You know, whether it be dust, chipping, rust, it's all weathering effects because it's altering the base color. That's my opinion of weathering. When I do my wrecks and rusted vehicles and burned out vehicles, for me that's all weathering.
Which airbrush are you
I'm using the chrome.
sizing? What size is your needle?
I got the fine one, the smallest one in there.
Okay. That could be 20.
Yeah, I always use fine, unless I'm painting a base, then I'll go to my single action with a medium, and you know, 'cause then I can get a bigger area. I like to use just plain water, clean the cup out, and then once it comes out clear, a couple of drops of the airbrush thinner, cleaner, and then I'm ready for the next color. So like I said, weathering with acrylics, you know, it starts right here at the airbrushing of the model. 2 drops. This is a lighter color. Just going to take water. It's nice and thin now. If you don't thin it, it's going to go on heavier and you're not going to get the subtle effects that you want. And basically, you know, similar to color modulation, but I don't like color modulation. I prefer to do it the way vehicles will have faded paint, or your car, you know, the way it really is. Not light coming in from different directions. And what I'll do is I'll just randomly do some light spots here and there, and maybe hatches, a brighter color, a lighter color rather. Like my regulator? Thing's old. It's still working. I just dropped the air pressure and it's something like 10. So now I can get nice and close and I can really, you know, do like the streaking on the sides. And that all that is, you know, getting ready for the dust and dirt effects that we add, you know, the weathering. It's darker color. No, I don't do much cleaning. It's mixing the colors together, basically. It's the way I always start my models. It's a lot easier. Can't see anything. It's a lot easier to start weathering with an airbrush since you're already putting a base color on. It's just a matter of switching colors, and you see that it dries, so you can go ahead and add next color or camouflage. You can paint your camo. If you're gonna mask, I recommend waiting till it starts curing. That way you don't lift it. So after a day, you can go ahead and mask. Blue tack won't affect it much. That's what I like to use. And you can do post shading as well. You know, dirt built up. This one. I started some with the light dust. I can go and add, you know, a dirtier color. Just hit regular hair and it dries right up. And that's when you can start already doing the lower hull. Basically, when you're doing your base colors, try to do as much as you can with the airbrush, because it saves you a lot of time later with the paintbrush and, you know, trying to do certain effects, or, you know, do a little bit, airbrush again, and clean your airbrush. And I do everything right at once. Of course, you know, while you're weathering with the paintbrush, you can come back and do more things with the airbrush. You know, I can come back and add more dirt, build up in there with the airbrush. I do this all the time because when I'm building, I have 3, 5, 7 models going at once. So I'll paint one thing, reach up, grab a model, and just start painting with it. You know, adding this and that, and you can get a lot done with a few drops of paint in there. Just adding dust and dirt, and then you look and say, oh, I'll add some more to that one. And the weathering with the acrylics are great because it's very forgiving. Once you get the feel for it, how much to thin it, and with the air pressure and what you can do, you're going to be hooked on airbrushing acrylics, definitely. The primer colors are the same way.
Which paint are you using now?
I hope so, right?
If you have Tamiya there,
This would be the
wear
last
your
thing I
mask.
did for them if it was ammo or AK paints.
But put your mask if you have solvent base. But you can also use the masking, the Tamiya masking tape. You talk about to wait for about 1 day until the paint is fully cured. But when we are in the Nuremberg Toy Fair, the people that they are painting there, they paint. You can put the masking tape, the Tamiya
The Tamiya
one.
low tack.
Yeah, the low tack, and you can. You don't have to wait in 5 seconds. You can put it and take it away, and it will not take out the paint.
The purple, I think 3M masking tape is also good. I used to use the blue one, and I've had it pull on me. Regular masking tape, don't even use it for masking.
Yeah.
I use blue tack all the time. I reuse them. I've been using the same package of blue tack since '94.
have to manufacture
Blue
blue
tag?
pad now? We have to manufacture blue pad, but you're not a good customer.
I know, that's what you told me.
I use silly putty.
That works too. There's a lot of things you can use, but I've had a lot of people say they had problems with it pulling paint off. A lot of times that's because the person didn't apply the paints correctly in the primer. The way I painted this, that's the way you want to paint the primer on too. And I mean, I can prime this clean, come back and put the base color on. And once you have your camouflage and everything, let it sit till the next day and dry, and well, cure. Because then you can come back and you can soak the model and start having fun with it. Pigments or wash or whatever.
So now, on that little wedgie, say you were gonna chip that now, how would you chip it?
Well, it depends. What kind of chipping? You mean like hairspray technique?
Yeah.
Or just regular
Using a
paintbrush or sponge?
solution or hairspray?
I would have done the color you want to reveal. You put on, let it dry. You can put a matte varnish over it to seal it or protect it. Chipping medium, spray that on, and then wait a little bit. If you want to remove a lot of paint, like a really worn off whitewash, then soft brush, dampened. Don't wet the model like you do with the hairspray technique. Just wet that brush and go over it. You'll see that it's already started to chip and remove paint. If you wait an hour or two, you'll get much finer chips. I don't have the brushes with me. You can come over to my table. I've got a couple pieces that I was playing around with the chipping fluid, and at home I did the crackle medium for chipping and rusting. But I have the stuff over there, and I'll show you how to do it. I have a couple pieces with chipping fluid on it, just needs a base color over it. It's been on since this morning, but I know I can put a base color over it and still chip it.
So now that that's painted though, and you maybe already say, oh darn, I forgot the chipping solution.
Oh, I've done that.
Now you can go ahead
Done
and brush or sponge that?
Yeah, you just wet it. You can use the airbrush cleaner, you can use the airbrush thinner, but if you wet it, I see I didn't bring any stiff brushes for that. Something pointy. But yeah, if you wet it and let it sit a while, you can go and chip away at it. I mean, I've got a model over there. Do I have it there? No, I don't. I might have something here that was done, yeah, I do, 4 years ago, and that was in combination with pigments instead of hairspray. Pigments and oils, and I can still go and chip it. Even right now with the second, not camo scheme, but I painted it, chipped it a little bit, and then I just gave it another paint job, and I can still go and chip it. But yeah, I mean, if I had stiff brushes, I could show you, but you can chip it, you know, and create your effects. Stiff brush will do it. Or you can use the sponge or the paintbrush. I mean, as long as it's not fully cured, you can wet it and then come in and chip away if you want. I mean, it'll scratch off once you wet it. So
How long does it take to fully cure?
24 hours, but 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours. I tell people wait 72 hours because everyone is different the way they paint and the way they do washes and whatnot. If you soak the model, get it really wet, it's going to soften the paint like I did here, and it will nick and everything. 72 hours, it's going to be rock hard. It's going to be like this thing. Well, I like it. This doesn't have much paint on it because I wasn't going to use that part. I was using this right here. That doesn't even have primer on it. What is this? But the paint still holds on it. But you don't go to your models and scratch it with your fingernail. I mean, accidental nicks with your fingernail, it's not gonna do much. I mean, light scratches, you're just gonna scuff it. If you put a lot of pressure, you're gonna remove the paint.
Is there
It always
a
happens.
significant difference between your primers and your model airs or your model colors? Do they cure harder, or I mean, besides the priming effect itself, maybe?
The resin in it might be different.
The model color has self-leveling properties. So a model air, it has a different binder. So it's a binder that should be a little bit harder compared to model color. And you can use and you can paint with a brush using model air, but it will work very good for doing some kind of washes or small retouch.
Yeah.
If you want to paint with a flat brush at 2 or 3 inches, I don't know, I would say centimeters, it will not perform as model color. And the primer, this is also a combination of polyurethane and acrylic binder. Polyurethane is also water-based. Urethane is the most common and very hard used by most of the manufacturers for doing 2K varnishes. And urethane is a very solvent and harmful product if you don't use it with care. But the polyurethane and the acrylic binder together, they give you a very strong paint film compared to the regular acrylics.
As long as you apply it
But
properly.
But of course, if you apply it and you want to continue painting, the acrylic has to polymerize. It's not a very fast evaporation. Water has to go out. So sometimes the process is a little bit compared to the solvent, that in a short term the solvent goes up very fast.
Yeah.
And it's not hard enough, but it dries. Drying time, I think acrylic will be faster, but the strong paint film with acrylic, it will take a little bit longer compared to the solvent. This answers the question.
Yeah.
All right, filters. We all know what filters are, and we use them, right? Sometimes washes. I like to use the acrylics, mainly the model color, like you said. But I didn't bring one that I want to do it with, so I'm using model air. Works the same. You can thin it down a lot and apply a filter with it, just like you do with those enamel ones or with oils. I used to make my filters with oils. I like to thin it a lot and it just go over like you normally do with a filter. And to create, certain effects, I'll take a brush before it dries, stipple it, remove some. You can create streaks with it. And it dries fast compared to the enamels and oils. And what I like to do is make thicker mixes, kind of like a wash. I do it right before the wash. Wet brush, some paint to create effects like shadows and whatnot. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of faded into the Panzer Gelb, and it's because the wet brush, and I held it on like a 45-degree angle with just the paint on the tip. And what it is when you go across, you're applying the paint, but because of the wet brush, it's fading it in, so you don't have that strong contrast. And you create nice shadow effects and alter the paint.
And you found that a 45-degree angle was more effective that
Yeah.
way.
It's a lot easier because you don't have to come back in later with a wet brush and try to clean it and blend it in. It blends right in really quick.
But the model wash flows much better compared
Yeah.
to the model air thing.
Yeah, for washing the filter, the model wash is good. But for altering Well, you can use the model wash to create shadows and alter colors, and that's what I like to use for doing dust and dirt.
Excuse me, were you using the thinner or the water as your two?
Water.
Okay, I thought that was what
Yep,
you had. but I
water.
wasn't sure.
I have always have wet brushes, damp brushes with me. You know, you'll see me wetting a brush and just putting it down, but so I have something there for when I need it. I sprayed some dust on there earlier, and I don't know how you do it. I used to use oils and enamels to do the earth effects, dirt and dust, how it builds up and collects. I use acrylics for that. I use the wash first, and I might let it dry a little bit. You can come in with a rag, remove some excess, and it also dries it. You take your large brush and you can blend it in. It's everything that you use enamels and oils for. Just regular paint, not thin. I don't know if everyone can see that. I'm just applying some like right along the edge. And just let it dry a little bit. Damp brush. Just like you do with your oils and your enamels, you blend it in. And when it dries, it's dead flat. And like I said, if you want to try anything or have any questions, come over to the table. I have everything there, and I'll throw a brush in your hand and you can go for it as long as you want. And you know, I'll show you some things, and it's better to sit and get a feel for it by doing it. I can show you all day long, but I can do this in my sleep because I do it all the time. When you get home, if you have an old model like this old thing, paint it, break out the paints, water, and just play around and see what you can do. The paints are just a tool, okay? Just like a kit is plastic. You have to put it together and you have to paint it. This is just a tool, and with this tool, it's like a hammer. You can do anything with it, you know, or a buck knife, you know, Swiss Army knife. That's what that is to me. It's just a tool. I don't go buy, you know, model layer just for airbrushing, and that's it. Or wash just for wash. It's a tool. Use it for whatever. It's the right color for whatever. Use it, and you'll be surprised what you can do with paints if you have control of the paint. Just because paint says it's, you know, U.S. olive drab, hell, that's perfect color for dried up dirt, you know, and don't have to airbrush it on. You can wet brush it, and you can just keep mixing. You can add more. You can mix paint with the wash and create different effects. 45-degree angle. That's how I do my weathering. I just take whatever and I do as much with it as I can. You can take a rag, hit it, let it dry, hit it with the hair dryer, add another layer, a different color, blend the colors. You can grab your paintbrush, flat brush, and you can create streaks with it at the same time. So you don't need streaking grime to do streaks. A certain enamel to do dust and everything. Take one color, you know, U.S. drab, and play around with it. Still got more over there, just come over here, add some dirt and dust. And when it dries, like I said, it's dead flat, and you can just keep going and add different colors. And it's like real vehicles. Anyone that's in the military knows what a vehicle looks like, where it gets dirty. And that's exactly what you can do. Just keep adding, and that's just about dry. I can come in with a light color dust now, add another layer, and then do spatters. You can do spatter easily with paint. That's all you kind of think. You can do your dirt and mud spatter easily at the same time. Yeah, it's on there. I don't have my glasses on, so.
I hear you.
There's some dark dirt or mud on there. Take a lighter color. Probably noticed that I just go ahead and I'm not very picky about cleaning and whatnot. Because all it does is create more effects. Bad lighting. Well, you can pass it around. You can kind of see it's on there. I'm trying to rush things so I can cover as much as I can, but at home, you'll sit there, you have more time, and you can go all around the vehicle and do it. And once sit down, go and have coffee or whatever, get a bite to eat, come back and start adding more. Go and get a beer, That's what I do.
What would you do for like a heavy mud?
Heavy mud?
Clunky mud or up in the driveway?
Yeah, pigments.
Stuff.
Pigments, you can
Mix
use
it with
pigments,
the
yeah.
paint or-
Mix it with the paint. I like to mix it with the model wash. The
Really?
European Earth
Yeah.
model wash and the pigments, mix it up so it's thick
Nice,
and just
thick and-
flick it. Flick it or airbrush, very low pressure.
Yeah, right.
But I like to flick it because I have better control. Airbrush,
Yeah.
it goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not what I was looking for.
There's a lot more you can do as far as weathering. I don't know what you all know as far as techniques and how you like to paint your model weather. Some people like it pretty clean and just maybe a light dusting. Some people like to throw as much on there, the way it really looks when you go to the field.
Yeah.
That's how it is. It's not spending every day on the wash rack. So those are just some light, subtle effects, just with, a couple of colors real quick. And you can go all the way around and do that. And the top is already dry, so is the sides. And you can just, add more oil and grease effects. You can come in, do your chipping, and then add some more dust. Alter the color a little bit, get some green, do some scuff marks. When you scuff the dust off, you get right to the base color, and take the green and you do the same thing. A couple of scuffs on the edge because it's worn off. From climbing on there, you wear the dirt and dust off. The more layers, I don't know if everyone's heard people saying that. I know Adam Wilder believes in that too. Layering. It's all in the layering. Excuse me. You want thin layers. If you start adding thick layers of this and that, you're going to hide a. Oh boy, get my coffee. You're going to hide a lot of the details. Unless you want to do mud and dirt, then you can go on pretty thick. Light, thin layers, what you're doing is creating a lot of different effects and making it look like something real, more lifelike than something that's not weathered and looks like a model or a toy. And by adding layers, it just makes every little thing on the model pop. My Dana that's over there, that is just me sitting there, water, wet brushes, a little bit of paint, and putting some on, different color, fading the panels a little bit, adding a different color for discoloration. You can sit all day long and play around to one section of a model, one thing, a hatch or whatever. There's just so much you can do with the acrylics. As long as you have water and you put nice thin layers down, you can create some awesome effects with it. And you don't need the oils. I can't believe I'm saying it because I used to swear by the oils. I used to do a lot with oils, create a lot of nice effects, but once I got more and more acrylics, then I started playing around and trying to replicate the same effect that I used to do with the enamels and the oils, because I got tired of waiting before I can get in there and do something. And when I ran out of patience and I get there and do something else, then the thinner is ruining what you just did, And you can't ruin with the acrylics, because once it's dried, then you can just build up on top of it. And very thin layer upon layer will give you different effects. And try not to be uniform. When you're painting your models and weathering, don't make everything the same. Do one area darker, lighter, a little more, a little less. It gives the model character and more dimension. I say dimension because it doesn't look monotone and like a toy. Just like with the real things, you look at a vehicle, you see every little thing, especially when it's got dust and dirt on it and grime. It gives the vehicle character, just like a model. With the acrylics, don't be afraid to experiment and try things. The bottle wash can be used for pin washes, which works great. If you're doing pin washes or washes with the model wash, I always tell people, if you don't put a satin varnish over it, just take a damp brush and wet the surface. What you're doing is you're going to break that surface tension. And the matte paint, everyone probably knows this already, experienced it, matte paint will absorb the pigments right out of a wash or a filter, and it's stuck on there. And that's how you get your tide marks. And you don't get that nice flow with the wash. You dampen that area. Once you apply the wash, it's going to just flow better. And it's going to be easier to clean up too. Can't really see. Flat brush, dampen. You can remove the excess. You can let it dry a little bit and come in and do it. I like to, pick up my brush and do it, and then move on a little bit. And then I'll, play around there, and then I'll come back with the damp brush again, add some more, or just clean it up a little bit and go here, go there, bounce around the model. You can do a lot of weathering with acrylics in one sitting that you wouldn't be able to do with enamels and oils. And especially if you're just bouncing from one spot to another, or from there to there, and then you go back and add more. The washes, like I said, and showed you, you can do it for dust and dirt. You can thin it and use it as a filter, which works good. Yeah, I'm heavy-handed at times. Because I know I can always go in and, take regular paint, add it to it. Sponges work great. Cosmetic sponges are awesome for weathering, because you can come in, dab it, and it starts to dry right away. Then you come in with, darker colors, lighter colors, just altering the paint, creating different effects, all weathering effects. Just don't be afraid of the paints. Experiment, play with it. You'll find you can get a lot more done in a shorter period of time with the acrylics and water. Have brushes there, damp brushes. If you don't like something, wet the brush, clean it up, start again. Or leave it on there and just apply something else over it.
Do you use that modulation technique a lot, or?
I don't like, some things.
Some guys like to do the weathering and let the.
I might mask a panel or something that I want to bring out more, or like hatches and nuts and bolts.
Right.
For me, natural light, that's the way it's going to look. Horizontal surface is going to be lighter, and I like to create my shadows. There's the panel spot modulation, where you do the center of the panels like aircraft guys do.
Right.
That's a form of modulation. But I like to just create shadows and highlights, and then with the paintbrush, I go ahead and take a step further.
Right.
You can take just regular paint and really have fun and create nice effects. With brush, just a little bit on the tip, just like I did before. And I like to come in and just play around with that paint until I like it, until I think it looks good. You can add more later, and just to bring that edge out.
Rob, I have a question. Could you talk a little bit about types of acrylics and thinners, and the idea of, how some people say, well, you can alternate, between acrylic and oil, and acrylic and oil, and you don't break down layers of what you've done before.
Yeah, I mentioned that before.
Did you?
Yeah.
I came in late, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the way I used to paint when I was working with oils and enamels. I would do acrylics and then weather a little bit with oils and hair dryer, try to dry it off, and then go with some acrylics. But at one point you have to stop because it's too much at once, and you're going to end up blending everything together. With the acrylics, I don't worry about that. I just keep going and going. When I go to bed, that's when it's drying and curing. And next day, I can go right in there and continue again. You can do a lot in one sitting, even if it's just a short 15-minute session. You saw what I did, just slap it on there, clean, dry it off a little bit, add a little bit more, and you can build some nice effects with
This is
it.
strictly with water base.
Yeah.
The acrylics that are not water based.
No, I've tried them.
That's different. It's
You
not
can't
really
get to
the
work.
same thing.
Just like some of those
Like the Tamiya,
acrylics,
for example, is not really acrylic.
you won't be able to create effects like this with a paintbrush.
Okay, sorry.
You missed it.
I asked this
So you
guy,
don't-
he talked about it. he said he-
Ceasefire.
You don't
Ceasefire.
necessarily start out dark and then
Clear
go
and
to
elevate.
light or whatever, you're just mixing and matching however you have to feel.
Yeah, the way I want it.
doesn't really-
It depends. Some colors I might go lighter if I know I'm going to do a lot of washes.
First to start out with.
Yeah. Dust. Dust effects works great on vehicles like this. That's green. Pans are gray. Creating dust and dirt effects on a desert vehicle is hard.
It's a lot more challenging.
Yeah. For that, a nice little trick is give it a satin varnish and then start applying your filters and your washes and all your weathering, because then you'll see that slight difference between the, it'll be more of a towards the matte than the satin after you do filters, but you'll see the dead matte compared to the paint, just like on your car or on a regular vehicle. That's one little trick. Going with darker earth colors on those light colors, but best way to practice and have fun and doing effects is something that's green or pans of gray. You can get a KV1 from Trumpeteer for $20 and have a great time. You can paint that thing for a year, just adding more and more, and you'll learn a lot from it. And you can see here, the one side I just playing around with it, and this side is just fading from the airbrushing and a little bit what I just did. And you can do a lot with it if you have the patience and the nerve to do it. I mean, a lot of people are hesitant. They're afraid to ruin the model. Take an old model. If you take your model and you put it on, you know, and you think you screwed up, wait. Because maybe you just did something pretty damn awesome. A lot of my models that I've done over the years are all screw-ups. Every model is an experiment, a test bed for me. Different color, mix this and that, you know, see how that works. Okay, that didn't come out the way I like it, but it's not too bad. Go with it. You know, you'll create some better effects. Also, try to envision things, you know, and how you can do that, and while you're doing it, you know, just do it, or do what I do, zone out to some music and just start applying things. Sponge, this, that, and wipe, you know, wet rag,
Turn on the
wipe.
Lifetime channel or something.
I have the music going, you know, my dogs are there and I'm just wiping and you know, it's like, okay. Then I'll go back, do something else. Not having a fear of the paints, it's a tool, you know. Are you afraid of your hammer or your screwdriver or whatever? Yeah.
The paints are confirmed to ASTM D454, so they have been reviewed by a toxicologist. They are also confirmed to European regulation and also to the North American ones. So that means that the product is reviewed by or confirmed to ASTM. Means that if something very harmful or toxic they found in the formulation, it should wear a warning phrase printed that it will damage your lungs, or do not inhale, or something similar. So in this case, all the paints that we manufacture for hobby are okay against the American regulation and also to the European, because we are based in Barcelona, in Spain. So in this case, you can be a little bit afraid when you switch from solvent-based acrylics to water-based acrylics, but not about, you can forget about some kind of health issues compared to other kind of solvent-based paint that they have not been reviewed, because into the hobby market, it's very small. If you go to fine arts or craft, you need this kind of certification. But in hobby is like people, they don't care.
What?
You see, Texas is confirmed to the STM because they sell in Michael and they sell in Big Blitz. That this other kind of
That's why everyone
this
switched
is what they needed. Gunster, they don't need. Tamiya, I don't know. I know that they had to took out some colors because they were not okay. They had to reformulate that.
Yeah, a few years ago, it was hard to get those paints.
So they are having issues. In this case, you don't have to be worried. It's always recommended to wear a mask, but there is really no need. Particles on the air, they are not good, but they are worse with solvent-based than compared to water-based. Also, these colors, they are allowed to be painted over toys that they can be used by boys.
Kids.
By kids, because there is not heavy metals on the formulation. So you can paint a kit for a child, for a little boy, and he can leave that he's not going to get any kind of harmful ingredients.
We've all done it before.
2 beers.
Washing them out.
There you go.
1 beer too
Finally, a
many.
paint
Forget
that's safe for you
you
to
have
use.
it, and like, done it so many times.
So if you see a model out there you really like, just run up and lick it. Take it off.
Yeah, with these, I don't worry about it. It used to suck with the oil paints and be like,
Yeah, I've done that.
we've all done it. We've all done it.
Wrong end of the brush.
Don't even think about it. You stick it in, you go, the wife's looking at you. You lean over. We've all done it. Gotta have a laugh.
Paint color.
Yeah, when I say don't be afraid of the paints, it's what I've been telling people for years. I go to shows, I do demos, I get a table, I'll sit there and do stuff and show people, you know. I did it with some of those other companies the past few years with their acrylics. I know how they work, I know how these work. That's why I have the experience with it, and I can tell you, don't be afraid of it. You can do anything you want with these paints. Anything. You just have to take something and do it. You know, I know some people that are hesitant to do it, and eventually they got around to it. And once they started doing it and stopped shaking, got a feel for it, they loved it. The same thing with the airbrushing. People like take the damn thing and paint it. Especially an old model. It's just a model. It's plastic. Even my built models, my Dana for me is just a piece of plastic. I don't care if it falls and breaks or whatever. It's just plastic, and I had fun with it, and it's over with. That's the only built model I have in my house so far. It'll probably be sold in the next couple weeks and make room for more toys to play with.
I always used to look for like a set of rules or guidelines that would help me paint like Rob or Adam or whoever, and they don't exist.
I can't
just started
tell you,
experimenting
you
and
do this, you have to do that,
I
because
moved farther than
everyone is different. You might
Yeah.
have a different feel for it and do it a different way.
Right.
This is what works for me, and I know from practicing, I don't have one set way of doing it. That's why I tell you, just practice. Don't be afraid of it. Do something. Because every model, every time I pick this up each day, I'm doing it differently. Because I get a different result. Don't be afraid to experiment, try different ways, more water, less water. You'll get a feel for it, and when you're doing your model, you'll realize that you're just doing it without really sitting, looking, thinking, okay, I'm gonna do this and that. You're gonna be going like this and painting, and then it's like, oh, I already did that, and you're gonna move on. Once you get a feel for it, it's like the airbrushing, with the enamels and everything, and the oil paints, how we got so used to working with it, it was second nature to us. That's how it'll be with the acrylics. Once you get over that fear and get in your head that you can do anything you want with it. Don't go by, model, wash, and that's it. You can do anything with that. I can airbrush. I have no problems airbrushing, model, wash, or creating filters with different colors and mixing pigments with colors or with the wash and just putting it on and seeing what happens. You'll be surprised.
Can you talk about decals, when, and then how you treat decals?
Oh yeah, decals, huh? You guys use those, don't you?
I'd like to.
you can use your paints for this.
Yeah.
Better get a real
Use
small.
stencils? You use a lot of stencils.
When there are markings, it's a decal or stencil. I do mainly wrecked and burnt out vehicles, so for me, half of the kit parts are in the box still, and
That's how you get away from it.
decals, that's how you can build 6 at once, nice and fast. Decals, most of the time, I don't use them because it's burnt out or rusted or so old. If I do, I might use stencils, or I do use the decals. Yeah, like right here would have been the time I would have done it. Okay, gloss coat, gloss varnish, decals, the setting solution. We have all that stuff, and then matte coats over it. Once I get a couple of nice light matte coats over it and it's sealed, I'll let it dry, and then I'll come in and I'll just have a blast with it. And you don't have to worry. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about decals. I've got a drawer full of decals if anyone needs it.
I have that same airbrush, Badger Chrome, but when I spray Model Air, I get tip dry every time I stop the air flow.
What air pressure?
Any air pressure, any from 10 to 20, it doesn't matter, I still get dry. My question is, could that be because my air source is CO2 and not not compressed air? Does that make a difference again?
It might. It might, because if you're spraying with low pressure and if you're thinning, it also depends too on the session, spraying session. Something quick like this, it won't happen so much. And that's why I said I don't put a lot of paint in the cup when I'm painting. Even if I'm painting an entire model, 10 drops of paint in paint. You have less chances of it drying in the airbrush. a wet paintbrush or a Q-tip and just occasionally brush the needle off, you know, and then keep going. What I tend to do is, before I refill the cup, a couple drops of water, full pressure, spray it through, blast any junk out, and then 10 more drops, and then I keep going. Long paint session, you know, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. I've been there, you know, 45 minutes with one model painting it. You will eventually get it drying up on the tip, and that's why I say just clean it off,
Yeah.
or occasionally, you know, pull the needle out, wipe the needle down. You know, especially if you're tilting it back, the airbrush back, it's flowing back in here, and that's where it'll dry up, and you'll be like, I can't move it anymore. And that's why I put some water in there, you know, back and forth, spray it out, and it keeps it. I didn't break this down once today with all the airbrushing I've been doing. Just
Yeah,
put it
yeah.
in water.
I tip it back on purpose, so I get the splatter effect.
Yeah. I paint like this, you know. Instead of tilting it like this, I'm painting like this, and it's coming back in here, and it's cleaning it a little bit. Don't break down. Put it away. A couple days later, come out. It's like, oh damn. Pliers. Airbrush cleaner cleans it right out, and you're good to go. Yeah, I always, when I store my brushes, after I use it, I have it pointing down, and I make sure I have a little bit of water in there, just a drop, a half a drop, whatever, just so it can work its way down and keep that needle tip wet, you know, in case there is paint on it, so it doesn't dry up.
That's good. Yeah, never thought of that either.
Yeah,
You're a genius.
I used to keep them upside down so it drains out, but then, you know, it's like, it goes back there, so now I just keep it like that. Or in a drawer where they're sitting like this. That way nothing flows back, because that's the worst thing is when it dries back here in the trigger, and you gotta try and clean that with your needle brush, and it's just a pain in the butt. But I don't clean that often, I don't break it down so much. Tomorrow I'll be painting all day long, and I probably won't break it down till the evening. Just by putting some water in there, blow it out, a couple drops of airbrush cleaner, switch colors. You know, Q-tip, boom, done. Next day, it's still good to go.
Alrighty then.
That's all I have.
Anybody got any questions?
If you have questions, you want to try something, do something, please come over to the table. I could have had a really good presentation. I started doing one because he asked for it, and started doing it up, and it's like, why? Because you're going to ask questions. I'm going to get off topic myself, and